Imagine pushing your friend into a river to escape a bear, only to face its wrath yourself, or taking a selfie near a feeding bear, unaware of the deadly risk. What would you do? These stories show how one wrong move can turn nature's beauty into terror. From a wildlife photographer abandoning his guide to a rookie ranger's tragic first day, each tale reveals the dangers of facing wild bears. So join us as we dive into 6 intense stories of betrayal, bravery, and survival against nature's fiercest predators. September 14th, 2024, dawned crisp and clear as Ivan and Sergei, lifelong friends from a small village in western Russia, set out on their long-anticipated hiking adventure in the dense Russian taiga. The two had grown up together, sharing countless memories of fishing trips and small adventures in the wilderness. Now, as adults, they had planned this journey to experience the untouched beauty of nature. The path along the river, edged by towering pines and thick underbrush, was peaceful, and water rushing beside them filled the air. Ivan was a tall, robust man with a hearty laugh that could break any silence, while Sergei, shorter and slightly built, balanced Ivan's impulsive nature with caution and thoughtfulness. They had always been there for each other, like brothers. Their families knew them as inseparable. And this trip was one they had been talking about for years. Hours passed as they hiked along the riverbank, occasionally stopping to rest and enjoy the scenic views. They talked about old memories, laughed about shared stories, and felt the strong bond only years of friendship could create. Everything felt perfect, as though nothing could disrupt the harmony of their adventure. However, as they moved deeper into the forest, they noticed the silence grew heavier and almost unnatural. Birds ceased their songs, and even the river seemed quieter. A sense of unease crept over them, though they brushed it off, chalking it up to the mysteries of the wild. Then, out of nowhere, a massive brown bear emerged from behind a tree, towering over them with its powerful frame. Ivan and Sergei froze, their hearts pounding as they locked eyes with the creature. The bear's eyes were fixed on them, and its nostrils flared, sensing their presence. The two friends knew that any sudden movement could provoke the bear, yet standing still felt like an eternity. Ivan's mind raced, and fear began to take hold, clouding his thoughts. In a split-second decision, driven by pure terror, Ivan acted on impulse. He reached out, shoving Sergei backward toward the river, hoping the distraction would turn the bear's attention away. Sergei stumbled, slipping into the icy water, the shock of the cold hitting him instantly. He gasped as the current pulled him slightly downstream, but he managed to cling to a nearby rock, regaining his balance. He looked up in shock and disbelief, unable to process what had happened. Standing alone on the bank, Ivan hoped the bear would focus on Sergei and leave him safe, but the bear's gaze never shifted from him. With a low growl that vibrated through the forest, the bear charged toward Ivan, its massive paws pounding the ground. Ivan tried to turn and run, but the bear was too fast, closing the distance in seconds. Still in the river, Sergei watched in horror as the bear reached Ivan, its powerful form overtaking him. He could only cling to his hiding spot, helplessly witnessing the terrible scene before him. The bond of friendship that had always felt unbreakable now hung shattered in the cold, unforgiving wilderness of the Russian taiga. Sergei felt a surge of helplessness as he remained in the cold river, clinging to the rock for stability. He watched from the water as the bear overpowered Ivan, its massive strength and weight forcing his friend to the ground. The forest echoed with the sounds of the struggle, a chilling reminder of the raw power of nature. Sergei's mind raced, frozen between shock and the primal urge to survive. He knew that if he made any noise or movement, he could attract the bear's attention, risking his own life. Time seemed to slow as he remained in his hiding place, his body tense and his breath shallow. Each second that passed felt like an eternity. Eventually, the bear seemed satisfied, its massive figure retreating into the dense woods, leaving a haunting silence. Sergei waited, unsure if the bear would return, unwilling to move from his cold sanctuary until he was certain the danger had passed. He cautiously emerged from the water when he could no longer hear the bear's heavy footsteps. His limbs were stiff and cold as he pulled himself onto the riverbank. Sergei's heart ached as he approached the spot where his friend had been. The harsh reality of what had happened was impossible to ignore. The once joyous journey was marred by fear and betrayal. Guilt weighed heavily on him as he replayed the events in his mind, Ivan's choice flashing before him with relentless clarity. The knowledge that his friend's decision had ultimately cost him his life left Sergei in a state of despair. In the quiet stillness of the forest, Sergei gathered his belongings, his movements mechanical and numb. He knew he couldn't stay there, but the burden of guilt and loss made every step feel heavy. As he made his way back toward civilization, the vastness of the wilderness around him felt overwhelming, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. The forest, which once felt peaceful, now seemed indifferent, starkly contrasting with the bond he had shared with Ivan. Returning to his village, Sergei found that the memory of that day would haunt him. The loss of his friend and the way their journey had ended became a weight he carried in silence, a reminder of the delicate balance between trust and survival. Though he survived, he knew that part of him remained in the forest, forever changed by the ordeal, bearing the scars of a friendship lost to fear and the unforgiving wild. On September 18, 2024, in the rugged wilderness of one of Alaska's national parks and preserves, a renowned wildlife photographer named Liam was on assignment, hoping to capture the powerful presence of the region's famed grizzly bears. With years of experience behind him, he was celebrated for his daring shots and relentless pursuit of the perfect image. Standing beside him was his guide, Mark, a seasoned outdoorsman who had spent countless seasons in bear country, respecting the animals and understanding the safety boundaries. This morning had brought the usual challenges of navigating the thick woods and uneven terrain. Liam and Mark trekked through the mist-covered forest, setting up their equipment near a popular bear feeding spot. Mark kept an eye out, his senses attuned to the sounds of the wilderness, while Liam focused on his camera, his thoughts consumed by the images he hoped to capture. Their silent rhythm was broken only by the occasional click of the camera and the soft rustling of leaves underfoot. As the hours passed, the quiet was shattered by a low, menacing growl. Both men froze, their eyes scanning the dense brush. Suddenly, a massive grizzly emerged from behind a cluster of trees, its gaze fixed on the two intruders. Standing only a few yards away, the bear held a commanding presence, its powerful body tensed and alert. Mark knew the dangerous situation and tried to stay calm, carefully positioning himself between Liam and the bear. He gestured for Liam to remain still, but the photographer's instincts changed. In a flash of fear, Liam made a split-second decision. Driven by panic, he turned and began to run, leaving his guide behind. His camera swung from his neck, capturing accidental shots as he stumbled, his feet catching on roots and rocks. His heart pounded as he glanced back, barely registering Mark's attempts to hold his ground against the bear. He watched as his guide shouted and waved his arms, hoping to scare the bear off. But the massive animal was not deterred. In his terror, Liam hesitated, his photographer's reflexes briefly overriding his fear. He raised his camera, snapping a few shots of the bear charging toward Mark, its teeth bared and its paws tearing up the earth as it closed the distance. The sound of the camera's shutter seemed out of place in the chaos, a stark reminder of Liam's purpose there. He watched in horror as the bear lunged forward, crashing into Mark, who fell to the ground under the animal's weight. Torn between survival and his instinct as a photographer, Liam turned away, his mind racing. Liam took off through the dense woods, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. Every step felt heavier than the last, and his mind raced with fragments of guilt and terror. As he ran, he could still hear faint sounds of the struggle he had left behind, each distant noise sending a shiver. The reality of his decision weighed on him, yet the instinct to survive drove him forward, deeper into the forest. The forest grew darker, the trees thicker, each branch brushing against him like a reminder of what he had left behind. He stumbled several times, his legs shaky and unsteady. The camera around his neck felt heavier now, its images haunting him. His hurried shots seemed to capture a bear's charge and a betrayal he could not erase. With every step, the weight of leaving Mark behind grew, settling like a stone in his chest. Finally, after what felt like hours, Liam found himself at a small clearing. The sounds of the struggle had faded, replaced by the quiet rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. He sank to the ground, his body trembling from exhaustion and fear. His thoughts circled back to Mark, the guide's bravery and sacrifice, He had trusted Liam, standing between him and the bear, giving him a chance to escape. Now, the silence around him felt suffocating, the stillness pressing down on him as he faced the reality of his choice. As dawn approached, Liam sat alone, staring at his camera, the lens smeared from his frantic escape. He knew what those images would show, yet looking at them was unbearable. They represented a moment he wished he could erase that had marked him forever. The forest seemed to close around him as if bearing witness to the consequences of his actions. His hands shook as he clutched the camera, the weight of what he had done sinking deeper. When rescuers arrived days later, guided by Liam's signal, they found him pale and withdrawn, his once sharp eyes clouded with guilt. He recounted the incident in hushed, broken sentences, avoiding the eyes of those who listened. The search team eventually located Mark's remains, and the signs of the bear attack were clear. Liam stayed back, unable to face the scene. He knew that nothing could change what had happened, that his actions had sealed a fate he would carry with him always. News of the event spread quickly and questions arose. People wondered why a respected photographer would abandon his guide and why he had chosen to capture images rather than help. Liam returned home to face a different kind of wilderness. The stares, the whispers, the judgment of a world that once admired him. The photographs locked away were never shared, reminders of a decision that had forever changed him. Liam found himself haunted in the quiet of his studio, the memory of that day replaying endlessly, a lesson etched in the stillness of the forest he had fled. September 5th, 2023, in the wilderness of Montana, a father named Greg and his 13-year-old daughter, Emma, embarked on a hiking adventure. Greg, a nature enthusiast who often took Emma on trails during weekends, had planned this trip to explore an unfamiliar route. Emma loved the outdoors, sharing her father's fascination with the forest, the wildlife, and the serene escape from their city life. This trip was special. They had intended to reach a scenic spot by dusk to see the sunset over the hills. However, they were running behind schedule, and as the afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Greg decided to take a shortcut to save time. They left the marked trail and headed into dense forest terrain, moving cautiously but with purpose. Greg was confident they would reach their destination quickly. The forest around them thickened, and the sounds grew quieter, with only the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant chirp of a bird breaking the silence. Despite the unease settling in Emma's mind, she trusted her father's judgment and kept walking alongside him, her eyes absorbing the rugged beauty of the woods. About 20 minutes into their detour, Greg and Emma began noticing fresh animal tracks on the ground, slightly indented in the damp soil. Greg recognized them immediately. Bear tracks. He felt a wave of apprehension but didn't want to alarm Emma. He calmly suggested they move a bit faster, subtly urging her to quicken her pace as they navigated the undergrowth. Emma, sensing the change in her father's demeanor, followed closely, her excitement slowly turning into an uneasy awareness of their surroundings. Suddenly a loud grunt echoed through the trees, halting them both. Greg knew immediately what that sound signified. They had unknowingly entered bear territory, possibly close to a den, where a bear might feel vulnerable and defensive. He felt a surge of fear as he spotted movement through the dense foliage. A large grizzly bear, its form looming and intimidating. The bear locked eyes with them, standing still but visibly agitated, watching the intruders in its space. Greg's mind raced as he calculated their options. The massive and powerful bear began to show signs of aggression, pawing the ground and making low growling sounds. Realizing they had no time to retreat, he made a quick decision. Whispering to Emma to climb the nearest tree, he tried to keep his tone calm, hiding his terror. Emma's heart pounded as she obeyed, gripping the rough bark as she scrambled up the trunk, her hands shaking but determined. From her vantage point, she looked down in horror as her father, standing his ground, tried to divert the bear's attention away from her. Greg shouted and waved his arms, hoping to startle the bear and buy Emma enough time. But the bear, now fully focused on Greg, began to advance, its steps heavy and purposeful. Emma watched, frozen with fear as her father attempted to keep the bear's attention. She knew he was risking his life to protect her, and the realization struck her deeply, amplifying her terror and helplessness. In the dimming light of the forest, the tension escalated as the bear moved closer to Greg, undeterred by his shouts. Greg's focus sharpened as the grizzly continued its approach, knowing each second counted. He stepped back, drawing the bear further from Emma's position in the tree. His movements were slow, calculated, and deliberate, aiming to keep the bear's attention fixed solely on him. Emma, clinging tightly to the tree trunk, watched in horror, her mind racing with fear and helplessness. Her father's figure seemed small and vulnerable compared to the enormous creature advancing toward him. She wanted to scream, to call out, but instinct held her silent, her body frozen with a mix of terror and shock. Sensing no threat from above, the bear kept its gaze on Greg. With a sudden burst of speed, it closed the distance between them, its enormous paws crashing against the forest floor, sending dirt and leaves scattering. Greg attempted to stay calm, holding his ground as long as possible. But in a swift, brutal moment, the bear lunged, its weight bearing down on him with an unrelenting force. Greg stumbled, his defenses now futile against the overpowering strength of the grizzly. Emma turned away, unable to bear the sight, but the sounds filled the air, vivid and unforgettable. She covered her ears, desperate to block out the reality unfolding below, her heart hammering with fear and sorrow. Time seemed to stand still, and all she could do was pray silently for her father's safety, even as she felt the unbearable truth sinking in. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds faded, replaced by the heavy silence of the forest. The bear, its aggression temporarily satisfied, moved away, lumbering back toward the trees. Emma dared to look down, her vision blurred by tears. Her father's still figure lay on the forest floor, and a wave of anguish swept over her. She clung to the tree for support, her mind struggling to process what had happened. In the silence that followed, the forest seemed to mourn with her, the towering trees witnessing the tragic scene below. Emma remained in the tree for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, her body locked in place by fear and grief. She knew she couldn't stay there forever, but the thought of descending to the forest floor and leaving her father behind was nearly unbearable. Eventually, as the sky darkened, her instincts pushed her to action. She climbed down carefully, her legs trembling with each step, feeling every inch of her journey back to solid ground. Once she reached the ground, Emma turned to look at her father one final time. A wave of gratitude mixed with overwhelming sorrow filling her heart. His sacrifice had saved her, yet it left a wound that would never fully heal. With a heavy heart, she forced herself to move away, each step a painful reminder of the price he had paid. She knew that she had to find her way out of the forest, to reach safety and seek help, carrying her father's memory as her guide. Emma felt a new resolve grow as she walked, a quiet strength born from her father's final act. His courage had given her a second chance, and she was determined to honor it, no matter how difficult the path ahead. She moved forward, her eyes set on the distant edge of the forest, the first glimmers of dawn lighting her way. On September 15th, 2024, deep in the Yukon wilderness, a hunter named Jack prepared for his second night alone in one of the most unforgiving landscapes of North America. Jack was a seasoned outdoorsman who knew how to track game and read the signs of the wilderness. Having spent years on solo expeditions, he held a quiet confidence rooted in his survival skills and respect for nature. This trip was meant to be like many others, a personal challenge, a chance to connect with the wild, and an opportunity to hunt in one of the last true wilderness areas. The evening was calm, the air cool and heavy with the scent of pine and fresh earth. Jack had managed a successful hunt that afternoon, taking down a large deer near the river. It had been a good catch, one he knew would provide for him on this expedition, and perhaps yield a few trophies. As dusk settled, he set up camp near a small clearing, precisely laying out his gear. His rifle was placed close by, and he began the meticulous task of cleaning the deer. Focused on his work, he sharpened his knife, slicing through tendons and stripping away the skin, completely absorbed in the ritual. Unbeknownst to Jack, a powerful scent wafted through the air, drifting toward the thick brush just beyond his camp. A light breeze carried the smell of fresh meat, attracting a predator's attention nearby. The wilderness was too quiet, as if the very forest was holding its breath. Jack remained unaware, his attention fixed on his task, each movement steady and practiced. Then, without warning, a low, guttural growl shattered the silence. Jack's hand froze, his instincts flaring as he saw a massive grizzly bear emerging from the trees. The bear's eyes glinted with hunger and territorial instinct, its enormous frame blocking the fading light from the forest canopy. Jack considered reaching for his rifle for a split second, but the bear's sheer size and speed made any such attempt seem futile. The bear lunged forward instantly, closing the distance between them in a terrifying rush. Jack barely had time to process what was happening as the beast struck him with its immense paw. The force sent him sprawling backward, his body slamming into the ground. Pain exploded through him, a brutal, all-consuming agony that spread from his ribs and into every nerve in his body. His vision blurred, and his breath came in shallow gasps as he lay helpless on the ground. The bear loomed over him, a towering figure against the darkening sky. Jack could feel the primal fear coursing through his veins, knowing he was completely at the mercy of a creature far beyond his control. The bear, drawn by the scent of blood and the instinct to dominate its territory, began to paw and sniff around the remains of Jack's kill, momentarily distracted. Jack lay motionless, his body broken, his mind slipping between waves of pain and an eerie numbness that came with the cold realization of his predicament. As the minutes ticked by, Jack's thoughts drifted to his isolation. He was miles from any form of help, with no one aware of his exact location. His family knew he was in the vast Yukon, but wouldn't expect him back for days. Even if he could move, there was nowhere to go, no haven in the heart of this unforgiving wilderness. Jack's breaths grew shallow, each one sending a fresh wave of pain through his battered ribs. The world around him was beginning to blur, the sounds of the forest fading into a strange, haunting quiet. In his final moments of consciousness, he felt the full weight of his solitude, of the wild's indifference to his presence. The cold crept over Jack as he lay motionless on the ground, his breath shallow and his body bruised from the bear's powerful attack. The forest had grown darker, the evening shadows deepening into the night as a thick silence settled around him. Having ravaged the remains of his fresh kill, the bear moved slowly back into the dense brush, leaving Jack alone and vulnerable. The immense pain in his chest and limbs made it nearly impossible for him to shift even slightly. Each breath felt like dragging shards through his lungs. As he lay there, the vastness of the Yukon wilderness felt all-consuming. Every rustle, every distant crack of a branch seemed amplified, filling him with a heightened awareness of his isolation. No one would come searching for him tonight. His family and friends knew he was out here, but they wouldn't suspect any trouble until he missed his expected return in several days. Even then, they would not know where to start looking in this boundless stretch of wild land. Through the haze of pain, Jack's mind drifted back to the decision he had made to come here alone. As a seasoned hunter, he had always prided himself on his independence and ability to survive in the wild with minimal resources. But now, with the looming threat of a slow, agonizing end, that pride seemed hollow. He realized that his years of experience, his knowledge of survival, had not prepared him for this brutal reality of facing nature at its rawest. The wilderness had no sympathy, no regard for his skill or experience. It simply existed, indifferent to the struggles of any one creature within it. The hours crawled by, each one marked by the relentless cold that seeped into his bones. The stars appeared above, their light distant and indifferent, as though watching over him with silent detachment. Jack tried to move his arms, hoping to find anything within his reach that might offer warmth or relief. But his body barely responded. He was losing sensation in his legs and hands, the numbness spreading as the cold took hold. His thoughts drifted to his family, his children's faces flickering in his mind, and he felt a pang of regret for the risk he had chosen to take by going out alone. Eventually, the sounds of the forest resumed, the creatures of the night stirring once more after the bear had left. Jack's mind, dulled by pain and exhaustion, registered the sounds in a detached way, feeling as if he was fading into the very landscape he had come to conquer. He had become just another part of the forest's ecosystem, another story left to the wild. By the time a group of hunters stumbled upon his lifeless form the following morning, the first light of dawn casting a faint glow over his body, the forest had already reclaimed him. The remnants of his camp lay scattered around, a silent testament to his struggle, his rifle resting where he had dropped it. Hardened by years in the wilderness, the hunters paused in respect, knowing the risks too well. In the aftermath, Jack's story would serve as a somber reminder to the local hunting community, a cautionary tale of the risks of solitude in the wild. His death underscored the importance of preparation, of knowing when to accept one's limits. Though the Yukon had claimed him, his legacy would be a lesson for others who ventured into its vast, indifferent embrace. The silent and still forest would bear no mark of his passing, carrying on as it always had, untouched by human endeavor. On October 5, 2024, Daniel, a 25-year-old hiker with a growing following on social media, set out on an adventure in a national park in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. Known online for his daring and sometimes reckless feats, Daniel had gained a reputation for getting close to the edge, literally and figuratively, for the perfect shot. His followers loved his breathtaking photos of towering cliffs and misty waterfalls, each picture capturing his passion for nature and thrill-seeking. This trip to the national park was part of his plan to grow his account further and capture the kinds of photos that would bring his followers closer to the wild experiences he chased. As he hiked through the park that afternoon, Daniel spotted a quiet meadow near the trail. Bathed in the warm golden light of the setting sun, the field seemed perfect for one of his classic photos. He carefully moved forward, holding his camera and snapping shots as he went, each step bringing him closer to the meadow's edge. Then he saw a large bear silently feeding among the tall grass and wildflowers. For most hikers, spotting a bear would be a call to retreat, a reminder of the risks of being in bear country. But to Daniel, it was a golden opportunity he knew would thrill his audience. Nearby, hikers noticed Daniel moving closer to the bear, and some whispered among themselves, anxious about his proximity. A few even called out, warning him not to get too close. But Daniel was too focused to heed their voices. His camera was ready, his heart racing, and he was excited to capture a once-in-a-lifetime shot. He had taken photos of wildlife before, but nothing like this. This was raw, real, and right in front of him. Driven by his ambition to share an unforgettable moment with his followers, Daniel crept closer to the bear, his every movement calculated for the perfect angle. He carefully framed his camera, adjusting it to capture himself and the bear in a single shot. It would be dramatic, intense, and unlike anything his followers had seen. He moved silently, careful not to disturb the animal too much, but each step brought him closer to an invisible line that should never be crossed. As he inched closer, the bear lifted its head, pausing to search for food. Daniel saw this as his chance, taking a step forward with his camera held high. Sensing the intrusion, the bear grew tense, its muscles coiling as it began to sense a threat. For the first time, Daniel hesitated, feeling a chill as he locked eyes with the powerful creature. In that instant, he understood that he had made a mistake. But the realization came too late. The bear, now fully aware of his presence, reacted. Without warning, the bear charged, its powerful limbs propelling it toward him with an unstoppable force. Daniel's heart pounded, his initial reaction turning from awe to terror as he realized the seriousness of his actions. He turned to run, the camera slipping from his grasp and falling into the grass, recording the chaos that unfolded. His instincts kicked in, but the bear's speed was unmatched, covering the distance in seconds. The onlookers, who had watched in growing horror, began shouting, trying to distract the bear, but their voices were distant and ineffective against the animal's determined pursuit. In those terrifying moments, Daniel faced the brutal reality of the wild he had once admired from a safe distance, his ambition clashing fatally with the unyielding power of nature. The bear reached Daniel with astonishing speed, knocking him down before he could gain any distance. Its sheer strength overwhelmed him, leaving him helpless as he struggled to regain his footing. The ground was rough and uneven, and his attempts to shield himself only seemed to aggravate the bear further. It swiped at him with immense force, each movement of its paws reinforcing its dominance and weakening him by the second. The pain was intense, but the shock and terror were even greater as he realized he was completely out of control and beyond any immediate help. From the trail, onlookers watched the horrifying scene, powerless to intervene but equally unable to turn away. Some tried shouting louder, waving their arms to distract the bear, but their efforts went unnoticed. The once idyllic meadow was filled with tension and fear, starkly contrasting to the serene scene it had been just moments before. Witnesses, frozen by the sight of the bear's fierce reaction, could do nothing but silently hope that the bear would eventually back away. After what felt like an eternity, the bear, seemingly satisfied that the threat was neutralized, finally began to retreat, leaving Daniel's motionless form behind. The meadow fell silent, the bear vanishing into the cover of the trees as quickly as it had emerged. The stunned onlookers hesitated, gathering themselves before moving toward the spot where Daniel had fallen. What they found was heart-wrenching, the aftermath of a tragic encounter that left an indelible mark on all who had witnessed it. Rangers soon arrived, alerted by other hikers who had fled the scene to seek help. With a mix of professionalism and sorrow, the Rangers began their work, examining the scene and gently moving Daniel's belongings, including his phone, which lay discarded in the grass. The device, still intact, held the last moments of his life, an unintentional record of the dangers of disregarding the natural world's boundaries. A sense of sadness filled the air as they reviewed the images and footage. This tragedy was a loss and a profound reminder of the consequences of seeking glory at the cost of personal safety. News of the incident spread quickly, with Daniel's final moments becoming a cautionary tale shared widely on social media and news outlets. Many felt sorrow, but some also felt anger, viewing his actions as reckless. The following conversation highlighted the fine line between admiration for nature and the risks of overstepping boundaries. Online communities debated the role of social media in encouraging risky behavior, with some condemning the culture of extreme documentation that often pushes people into dangerous situations. In the days that followed, the area where Daniel had lost his life was revisited by many, some leaving flowers or tokens of respect, while others paused to reflect on the importance of respecting the wild. Signs reminding visitors to keep safe from wildlife were added along the trail, and the park authorities hoped to prevent a similar tragedy. Though used to encounters between people and animals, the park rangers carried a newfound sense of caution. Their reminders and warnings to visitors now waited with fresh urgency. Daniel's family and friends left to cope with their loss, struggled to reconcile his passion for adventure with the terrible end it had brought him. His story became part of the park's legacy, a cautionary example that would resonate with future hikers and visitors. The lessons left behind by his life and untimely passing were not soon forgotten, etched deeply into the landscape he had loved, and as a reminder of the powerful, unpredictable beauty of the wilderness. September 18, 2024, marked a fresh start for Liam, a young man in his early 20s, as he stepped into his new role as a forest ranger in the vast wilderness of Colorado. Though he had completed basic training, the real-life experience he would gain here was a world apart from the classroom lectures and practice drills. With a deep love for nature and a passion for conservation, Liam had dreamt of this moment for years. On this first day, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he patrolled the scenic trails, taking in the towering pines and vast landscapes that stretched before him. He knew the job could be challenging and the wilderness was dangerous, but his enthusiasm overshadowed any concerns. Equipped with a standard ranger's kit, which included a walkie-talkie, bear spray, and a small survival kit, Liam felt ready to handle whatever came his way. It was quiet that morning, and as he hiked through the park, he mentally went over his training, recalling the protocols for various wildlife encounters. His excitement matched his commitment to protecting the natural environment and the visitors who came to enjoy it. As the day wore on, a report came in over the radio. A family camping near one of the popular trails had encountered a bear that appeared to be rummaging through their food supplies. Liam's pulse quickened. Although he had been trained to handle animal encounters, facing a bear on his first day was far from what he expected. Still, he knew it was his responsibility. He adjusted his bear spray, ensuring it was within easy reach, and set off toward the campsite, his heart pounding with adrenaline and nervous anticipation. When Liam arrived at the campsite, he immediately spotted the family huddled together, fear evident in their eyes as they watched the bear. The large black bear, likely attracted by the smell of food, was dangerously close to them, rifling through their supplies with surprising force. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Liam assessed his limited options. The bear was agitated and had started to growl, its powerful frame moving with an unpredictable intensity. The family was trapped with no safe escape route, and he knew he had to act fast to prevent a tragedy. Thinking quickly, Liam made a deliberate noise to divert the bear's attention from the family. The bear's head jerked in his direction, its dark eyes locking onto him as he stepped forward, attempting to draw it further from the campers. He hoped to steer the animal away with his bear spray without escalating the situation. However, the bear seemed to recognize the threat he posed, and instead of retreating, it began to advance toward him, its movements deliberate and unwavering. Liam's training emphasized maintaining a safe distance, but he was caught in a position where retreating would put the family at even greater risk. His mind raced as he tried to recall each step he had practiced, each precaution drilled into him. Yet at this moment, face to face with the imposing figure of the bear, theory and reality felt worlds apart. He took a deep breath, bracing himself as he mentally prepared to stand his ground. In the brief seconds before the bear reached him, Liam motioned to the family, signaling them to move back toward the trees. The father nodded, clutching his children close as they slowly retreated, their faces pale with fear. Liam knew that every moment he held the bear's attention was a second they could use to get to safety. The bear continued its steady approach, its massive body tensed as it sized up Liam, assessing the new threat before it. Liam stood his ground, gripping the bear spray tightly as he tried to keep his breathing steady. His mind raced through his training, focusing on every detail of the bear's movement, knowing any misstep could provoke an attack. The family had backed far enough away, but Liam understood that he couldn't hold the bear off much longer. His only option was to use the spray, hoping it would drive the animal away. As the bear approached, Liam raised the spray, releasing a steady stream toward its face. The bear shook its head and staggered slightly, clearly uncomfortable but not fully deterred. Liam's heart sank as the bear let out a low growl, stepping closer despite the spray's effects. Each of its movements felt deliberate, a test of his resolve and an assertion of its dominance in this wild space. Liam knew that his options were running out. The bear lunged, and instinctively Liam stepped back, attempting to maintain a safe distance. But the bear's speed was overwhelming, and within seconds it closed the gap between them. Liam stumbled, falling to the ground as he raised his arms to shield himself. The bear swiped at him, its powerful paw leaving him winded. He struggled to regain his footing, but the bear's weight pressed him down, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. In his final moments, Liam's thoughts drifted to the family he had saved. He felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that his actions had given them a chance to escape unharmed. His sacrifice would ensure their safety, and that thought alone gave him a sense of purpose and calm amid chaos. When park rangers arrived later, they found Liam's lifeless body where he had made his stand. The family, though shaken, was safe, forever grateful for the young ranger's bravery and selflessness. The story of Liam's sacrifice spread quickly, resonating deeply with the community and those who ventured into the wilderness. His heroic actions served as a reminder of the risks faced by those who protect both people and wildlife, instilling a lasting respect for the wilderness and the unpredictability of its creatures. In the aftermath, the park honored Liam's memory, and his story became a testament to the courage and sacrifice required to protect others. His legacy lived on, inspiring future rangers to carry on with the same dedication and bravery that had marked his brief but impactful time as a ranger.